Hey, welcome to WACTS. This is episode 5. We're covering what I did from February 10th to February 16th. We're shifting the schedule a little bit because of Better Call Saul, and I want to cover that for the last 10 episodes of the season. This week, actually, I'm just going to talk a little bit about each of my favorite categories, so we're going to get right to it. Video game. Quick update on my Global Game Jam game. I'm still playing with it a lot, just like last year. It's great. It's a wonderful launching pad for testing out a bunch of new lines of code. And again, now that it became a part of my architectural work, it's great to be going back and forth with code, and now they're influencing each other, and that's really cool. I'm not going to show it right now, but I've added like control panel stuff and all sorts of extra button things and fine-tuned some of the difficulty, and it's looking really good. So maybe if there's like a huge update and I add something like multiplayer, I'll actually show it again. But just wanted to say, cool. Now it seems like as good a time as any to talk about Metal Gear Solid 5. I'm not going to talk about my entire love for the Metal Gear series. That would take forever. Dates back to 1987. Really 1998, but 1987 was the first game when I played that. So anyway, Metal Gear Solid 5, I want to speak a little bit about why I continue to play this game. I still have all those other video games I mentioned in episode 1. I'm still working on all of them, but when I just have like an hour of free time and I really want to play something, I'm still going back to Metal Gear Solid 5. Why? It's a short game. It's been called a demo. It kind of is just a demo, and yet when I had the demo for Metal Gear Solid 1, Metal Gear Solid 2, I spent so many hours playing that short little demo. Why? I've been thinking about this. I think it's because as a recent IGN article put it very well, asking why we enjoy setting traps in video games versus just shooting people. It's when a game feels like a playground as opposed to an obstacle course. Now think about that. When a game is an obstacle course, you're trying to get through it usually pretty quickly. You're trying to jump over whatever things they throw in your way, and you're doing it as quickly as possible. When it's a playground, it's not necessarily the destination that's the goal. It's, okay, here's the parameters, here's the rules of what I can do, and maybe you just want to live in that world. I mentioned that Far Cry 4, I haven't progressed in the plot line at all, but I'm really enjoying just that world. Metal Gear Solid, I always play through the story as quick as possible because I really do love the story, but then it's so much fun to go back and tinker with things. You know, there's silly elements. There's a mission called Jamais Vu in Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes that I've played a bunch of times now because there's all sorts of tinkering you can do with how best to beat it. There's a ton of bad guys coming at you very quickly, and you can do stuff with a sniper rifle or a rocket launcher or a C4. C4 has been a big part of the game since 1998 when you could put a C4 mine on the back of a guy's back and let them like walk into a group of other guys and then detonate it. That's the trap mechanism. There's something really fun about that. Again, it's a sandbox. Anyway, just wanted to say I'm still enjoying it a lot. Check out that IGN article. I'll link to it below. Really great read. What makes setting traps in a game like Metal Gear Solid really fun for me is, A, it requires a lot of planning, and so when things go wrong, you know, you're like, oh, I want to try again, but then if you get it right, it's so satisfying, so much more than just running and gunning your way through a game, especially a game that's meant to be more stealthy. If you can set a trap and make all these things go off without a hitch and no one even knows you did it in the game, that is awesome. It's also fun because in a lot of cases, if it's done just right, it's actually a way to actually get through the game quicker. All the most recent Metal Gear Solid games actually give you a ranking at the end of each level or mission, and sometimes actually if a trap is done just right, it means that you manage to get through a sequence a lot quicker than you normally would. Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes, just a prologue to the main game. I'm not even wild about the plotline, and I'm still having so much fun with it. I give it 5 stars with a confidence of 5. What? Oh, virtual reality. Just want to say very briefly that this week I went to the New York City VR Meetup Group. I've actually known about this group ever since 2013 when I first started playing with the Oculus Rift. I kept meaning to go to meetings, always had a reason not to go, and now that I've moved, I thought maybe I'd never go. And then thank God one of my friends actually said, hey, are you going to this VR Meetup thing tomorrow night? I'm going there. I'm bringing a friend. I think you guys would really hit it off. He's born to play in VR. And I went, and it was fantastic. The demos being presented weren't actually all that amazing, but it was a great chance to network, show off my game, have a little bit of an ego boost, having people that actually are doing this professionally be like, hey, this is really cool. And that's how they talk. They're all really, ugh. I talked to the main organizer. He's a really cool guy. I showed him my cardboard app for our London theater and for the video game and talked briefly about how that worked. And he thinks I should give a presentation, which would be really cool. So hopefully that'll happen sometime in the next couple months before the group, which now has grown from, 10 people to over 100 people, it's going to be splintering off soon into smaller individualized groups. So it'd be great actually, because I feel like what I'm doing with VR is so cross-disciplinary to speak to a wider audience before everything gets a little bit more specialized. Just met a lot of really cool people there doing all manner of things. I talked a little bit about a play I really want to write that I've had in the back of my head for a while, which is called The Invention of Morel, where a guy's deserted on an island and he's kind of like spying on these people who are living there, and they have this routine, and he's always kind of looking, and he falls in love with this girl, and then eventually he finally works up the courage to try to talk to her, and then he realizes, oh my god, there's just like holograms, there's like this machine built on the island where they're just kind of cycling through this routine all the time, and rather than, die of depression or kill himself or something like that, he actually decides to embrace the madness of the situation and memorize the ritual to a point where he actually is able to interact and feel like he's a part of this totally machine-like quality of the island. Again, it's a little bit like a video game-like thing where he's perfecting, the perfect playthrough of this routine that happens over and over. It's really fascinating, and we're talking about how VR and augmented reality and holograms and all these kinds of things really could start to play an interesting role in live events in a way that isn't just the gimmicks that we've kind of seen so far. Tupac, Michael Jackson, that kind of thing. Articles. Speaking of the future of VR, this month's Wired, which I read cover to cover, had a really great cover story all about the direction Microsoft's taking, how it's becoming an innovative open source company again, everything about the HoloLens. Kind of interesting that this article, of course, was written before Google Glass announced that they were canceling Glass, because the whole article or the whole cover story is positioned in such a way where it's, HoloLens and Google Glass and Oculus Rift, and like, these are the main players, but now Google Glass is just totally out of that. So it's one of those rare situations where it's like, oh, Wired, you didn't see what was coming, but really great issue this month. I totally recommend it. 5 stars, confidence of 4. Podcasts. There's a great Nerdist Writers Panel episode from a few weeks ago that I totally recommend. It's Ben Blacker talking to TV executives. This is fascinating because usually he's talking to people in the writer's room, and there's a certain shared experience that writers who work in writer's room have that this is totally different from. And it is utterly fascinating to see love of shows, successes and failures of shows from that TV executive perspective, which is still more creative than you would actually think, but again, a totally different side of that world. Highly recommended. 5 stars, confidence of 5. Theater. This week also marked what's been a yearly ritual for me ever since I came to New York, the Samuel French Off-Broadway Festival. It's something that I found out when I first came to New York, and it was like, oh my god, how cool would it be? I could submit my little short play, and then it gets done by like Samuel French, which is a major, play publishing company, and it's on Broadway kind of in one of the Theater Row theaters, I think like the Acorn or something like that. And every year since I've got here in 2011 was the first year I submitted something, and I've always submitted, and I've never had anything accepted, but if nothing else, it's been a great exercise because I really do feel like every play I've submitted every year has gotten better and better. The first year, they had a limit of 3 plays you could submit, and I was submitting as many as I could, and they were kind of half-assed. The next year, they got a little bit better. I think I submitted 2. Last year I submitted Dystopia Pia, which I actually thought had a decent chance of getting in, but, it was complicated, and they want a really simple set, really simple staging that has a lot of actors, a lot of stuff going on, and I'm glad I got to do it on my own, so that was great. This year, I actually took a look back at a play I wrote back in 2013 called Poof. It's about a girl who suddenly starts to suspect that her boyfriend is a superhero. Now, I like that premise, and I tried some different things with it, and I settled on what I liked most exploring with that, is being convinced your boyfriend is a superhero and starting to fantasize and get really excited about all the things that could mean. Even it means like maybe you team up together and it could be this great bonding experience because your relationship could use that kind of excitement, and then finding out that actually your boyfriend is cheating on you with that superhero. When I originally wrote the play, I was going for what I'd say has been a problem of mine in plays in the past, which is the easy sex joke. Just a quick like, isn't that awkward or silly or sexy or blah. And it's a little bit quick, it's a little bit cheap. It's usually kind of a cop-out. So now what I did was I went back to it and I made it, I want to say a lot more heartfelt. Like it's not just like, oh look, your boyfriend's actually gay and he's having sex with a superhero, and he's wacky and super flamboyant. Because that's what a flamboyant gay guy's like. I actually made it like a real dilemma where the guy is actually really in love with both his girlfriend and the superhero, but not the superhero. He's in love with the person who, is pretending to be the superhero. He wants him to stop the whole superhero thing, whereas his girlfriend, so this is Kathy Donovan, and the superhero is Mr. Disappearer, or the human Poof, and he has all sorts of names in the play. But I like this idea that she's in love with the superhero and the idea of the superhero, but she knows nothing about him, and her boyfriend is very much in love with the person behind the mask. So I feel like I've mined that for a lot more grounded drama. I mean, there's still some silly things. The superhero still talks like a crazy smoked up drug guy. But I feel like there's a grounding to the whole thing that the play lacked before. So that's why I submitted, and I hope it does well. It'll be really great. We'll find out in a few months. Television. Just saw the 3rd episode of Better Call Saul. It was fantastic. In retrospect, the first 2 episodes feel like they were kind of setting up the chessboard, and now this is the first thing that feels almost like a case of the week kind of thing. Not really, because I think the entire season is really going to be this one case, but it had this great arc of here's something Saul needs to figure out. The audience can kind of play along and look for clues and try to see if they can get to the logical conclusion ahead of Saul, but then there's a resolution to that little plot within the larger case, and the satisfaction of seeing Saul all be right, and then a great little cliffhanger at the end. I thought this was a great example of how this show could sustain itself over time. I can't wait to see where it goes next. Great to see Jonathan Banks getting a little bit more involved. Great to see this relationship Saul has with one of the female attorneys at his brother's law firm, and how that's starting to develop. It's kind of interesting. There's some great laugh out loud moments. Just a great plot construction. It's so clear that the same writers from Breaking Bad are on the show. I love it. I give this episode 5 stars with a confidence of 2. Movie. Valentine's Day was a pretty full day for me. One thing my wife and I did is we watched a 1970 movie called Love Story. I'd never heard of this movie before. From the synopsis, the description, we kind of got like, oh, this kind of laid the groundwork for where a bunch of romantic comedies came from. And I thought, oh, this is going to be kind of silly and girly, but we watched it anyway. And I was actually hooked right away. Like, it felt a little bit like a play. The style was a little bit more heightened, I guess you could say. And the initial exchange between the two people who eventually fall in love was genuinely hilarious. Like, it's clever, but still has a naturalness to it, and it's really lovely. There's a lot of things happening in this movie where you can be like, oh, that's where 10 Things I Hate About You got that from. Oh, that's where She's All That got that from. Whatever. A lot of those tropes have been done to death. And then the movie took a really dark turn. You know right at the beginning she's going to die, but then, oh my god, that ends up being like the last 40 minutes of the movie, and it just gets sadder and sadder and sadder. I feel like most romantic comedies, they took a lot of some of the tropes of cutting to fun things and having certain exchanges between lovers-to-be, but they usually skip the whole dying of a slow, painful blood cancer thing. But interesting movie. Really cool factoid about it is we looked up the IMDb for it because I was like, oh my god, is that a young Tommy Lee Jones? Not only is there a young Tommy Lee Jones in this movie, it was his very first movie, 1970, and the main character in the movie is actually based on Tommy Lee Jones. I don't know if he actually had a love story like this, but that's what the character is based on. And you also find out in this IMDb trivia section, which I guess I'll link to down in the description, that Tommy Lee Jones was at Harvard rooming with Al Gore. Now, I just want you to imagine for a second, Tommy Lee Jones, very specific personality, Al Gore, other very specific personality. What do you think that was like? I would love to hear. I don't know if they've talked about it before, if there's interviews anywhere, but what a fascinating thought, right? It's pretty cool. Love Story, though. Fascinating movie. Ending super dark. Tears in my eyes. Maybe too much. I give it 3 stars with confidence of 4. Music. My wife and I can't stop listening to the Horse Comanche. It is an album with great replay value. After hearing it probably 20 times now, I think Chad just really crafted this well. Everything from the order of the songs to which ones he picked to the overall styles that each song has, because, you know, he always sounds different when he's playing them live versus on the album. It's all very well done. Chad also did a Reddit Ask Me Anything session earlier in this week, and I got to ask him a few questions. I mean, and that's not that weird. Like, I've spoken to him after shows before, but I did learn that the Story of Benjamin Darling Part 2 is going to be on the next Say Radio album. I learned that Route 27, referenced in Mr. Larkin, is in Massachusetts, and that he's doing a rock opera that might be about trains, but he liked my idea of it being about a baked potato that wants to become a dog, and he thinks it's really cool that my wife and I have been together for more than 10 years, and that his music has kind of been the soundtrack to our relationship. Aww. That's it for this week. I have no idea what's going to come up next week. It's just going to be a surprise. I'm definitely going to talk about the next episode of Saul. Let's go right to videos this week. First, we've got, in honor of Amazing Spider-Man joining the Marvel Universe, which is great. I'm super happy about that. Here's a video I made for Slackatory called How to Make a Superhero Movie in 10 Easy Steps. It's pretty silly. Some people took it really seriously, but it's fun. It has a bunch of views. Yay. Check it out. And what the heck, just a tag team off of that. Here's a little companion video I made because I enjoyed the sound of the Backstreet Boys going over superhero deaths so much that I just made a few more of them. So that just works with that video. So enjoy that. If you have any questions, if you have anything you want to recommend that I check out, let me know below, and I will see you next week. Bye.